The galactic diplomatic chamber buzzed with polite chatter as dozens of alien species gathered for what everyone assumed would be another routine meeting on interstellar cooperation. The hall itself was a masterpiece. Glass ceilings stretching into infinity, holographic constellations hovering in the air, and representatives from nearly every corner of the known universe. Next topic, humanity, announced Ambassador Harrell, his translucent tentacles rippling with faint amusement. The word human rolled out of his translator like the name of a particularly amusing pet. A chorus of alien laughter followed. "Ah, yes," chuckled Ambassador Kree, a towering insectoid with glittering compound eyes. The bipedal creatures who just learned to travel faster than light. Adorable. "They still use projectile weapons, can you imagine?" added Counselor Piss, feathers flaring with excitement. "Physical bullets." The room erupted in soft, clicking laughter. To them, human achievements were quaint, like drawings made with crayons by a proud child. Holograms floated through the air, showcasing human spacecraft, nuclear technology, and military parades. Each met with another wave of polite amusement. "They're quite proud of their nuclear fission," said Ambassador Atrill, prompting another round of laughter. "Maybe we should tell them we used that for cooking 10,000 years ago." The chamber doors opened with a smooth hiss. The laughter faded. A human entered, tall, calm, his footsteps echoing on the polished floor. He wore the formal diplomatic uniform of the United Earth Coalition. His badge read, "James Rodriguez, Human Military Liaison." Each step was steady, deliberate, and somehow confident. His expression carried the calm grin of someone who knew something funny, but wasn't allowed to laugh yet. "Ah, the human representative has arrived," said Ambassador Sell, raising his tentacles in what he thought was a friendly greeting. "We were just discussing the technological accomplishments of your species. Quite impressive for your stage of evolution." James smiled, not the practiced diplomatic kind. It was the kind of smile a wolf might give if wolves could grin. "Thank you, Ambassador," he said evenly. "It's always enlightening to hear how our allies view us." Counselor Piss fluttered closer, her feathers rustling with curiosity. "We understand you once served in your planet's military. Fascinating. Tell us, what was it like using such primitive weapons?" James's grin widened slightly. "Yes, ma'am. 15 years in the Marines. 3 different campaigns." He paused, eyes glinting. "But you know what's really interesting?" The room quieted. "None of you ever asked," he continued, "why humans have rules for how we wage war." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Rules? For war?" clicked Ambassador Kree, antennas twitching. "What a strange concept." James leaned casually against the central console, his relaxed posture making several alien diplomats shift uneasily. "Well," he said with a chuckle, "we needed rules because we kept getting too creative with how to kill each other." That silenced the chamber completely. The tentacles of Ambassador Rel froze mid-wave. "Too creative?" he echoed softly. "Oh yes," James replied cheerfully. His eyes glimmered with a dangerous sort of amusement. "If you'd like, I can explain why we had to ban certain weapons and tactics. It's actually a pretty interesting bit of history." He pulled out a sleek datapad. "So," he asked with a smile, "should we start with the basic war crimes, or jump straight to the fun stuff that made us write new laws?" James shrugged with a grin. "Of course, nothing sparks human creativity like finding new ways to make things explode. Speaking of which, have you ever heard of orbital weapons?" The translator of Ambassador Harrell flickered nervously, but it worked just fine. Every alien in the room understood him perfectly. "Let me tell you about kinetic bombardment," James said cheerfully. "We basically turn satellites into rods of doom." The aliens stared in frozen disbelief. "But your species claims to be peaceful," protested Ambassador Kree, his mandibles clacking in confusion. "Oh, we are," said James with a calm, predatory smile. "Very peaceful. We just like to have options, just in case." The chamber erupted in alarmed whispers. Dozens of alien diplomats began quietly updating their threat assessments on humanity. Meanwhile, James stood in the center of it all, hands in his pockets, softly whistling what sounded suspiciously like the Marine Corps hymn. "Don't panic," he called over the rising noise, grinning. "We haven't even gotten to the good part yet." After a long pause, Ambassador Suri managed to regain some composure. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "you could elaborate on these rules of war you mentioned earlier?" James's face lit up. Oh, the Geneva Conventions. Sure, it's simple, really. We humans kept inventing so many creative ways to kill each other that eventually someone said, hey, maybe we should draw some lines. Counselor Piss's feathers fluffed nervously. And those rules? She asked. Oh, just the basics, James said casually. No poison gas, don't shoot medics, no torturing prisoners, don't bomb civilians. You know, common sense stuff. Apparently, we had to write it down because some folks kept forgetting. The room fell into stunned silence. You needed written rules for that? Whispered Ambassador Cree. Yep. James leaned forward conspiratorially. And the funny part? We had to keep updating them because humans kept finding loopholes. Ambassador Shill's color faded to a sickly pale hue. Loopholes in not committing atrocities? Exactly, James said brightly. Take flamethrowers, for example. Couldn't ban them entirely, technically a legitimate weapon of war, so we had to make very specific rules about where not to use them, like, say, on civilians. You can imagine why. I think I don't want to, murmured Piss. Oh, and then there were expanding bullets, James continued, still cheerful. Standard rounds weren't causing enough tissue damage, so some bright minds designed bullets that grow inside the body. We had to outlaw those too. Ambassador Kree's antennae drooped. Your species designed weapons to increase suffering? James waved his hand dismissively. Oh, not for suffering. That was just a bonus. The goal was maximum tissue damage, although that skin-melting gas we cooked up probably leaned more toward the pain side. Several alien delegates looked ready to faint, assuming their species even could. But that's why we made the rules, James went on brightly. Of course, that led to some interesting debates, like you can't use serrated bayonets because they cause unnecessary suffering, but smooth bayonets? Totally fine. Ambassador Harrell blinked slowly. You needed to specify what kind of knife could be attached to your guns? James laughed. A bayonet is way bigger than a knife. Want to see the diagrams? They've got great charts on optimal penetration angles. No! Half the chamber shouted at once. James shrugged. Suit yourselves. The field manual illustrations are really educational. An alien aide stumbled forward, whispering urgently to Ambassador Cree. Sir, our archives just found something called the Hague Conventions. Were those different? Oh yeah, said James, delighted. Those were the beta version of the Geneva rules. You know, the early stuff. Things like don't use poisoned weapons, don't shoot surrendering soldiers, and maybe don't bomb defenseless cities. The obvious stuff. The aide fainted on the spot. But the best part, James continued, completely unfazed, is that we had to make those rules retroactive. Because after every war, someone invented something so horrific that everyone else said, yikes, let's ban that next time. Ambassador Shree's voice trembled. You made rules, assuming there would be a next time? Well, sure, James said, shrugging. We're not savages. We like to know the rules before we start the next one. He paused thoughtfully. I guess the war crime trials after the Second World War proved some people weren't reading the rulebook closely enough. You held trials for that? Asked a trembling council member. Oh, yeah, said James, smiling. Hours of discussions, definitions, legal categories. Trust me, nothing's more brutal than a 3-hour PowerPoint about the legal difference between a military target and protected civilian infrastructure. Those slides alone could qualify as psychological warfare. The chamber was so silent you could hear the soft hum of the life support vents. But hey, James said cheerfully, we've made progress. Most nations follow most of the rules, most of the time. Unless they think they can get away with it, or they're really mad, or, you know, it's Tuesday. Ambassador Harrell's tentacles turned colorless. Your species created weapons so horrific you needed multiple treaties just to define the bare minimum of decency. And you still sometimes break them? Well, said James, when you put it like that, it sounds bad. He smiled again. But look on the bright side. At least we try to regulate our wars. He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. Want to hear what we did before the rules? No, the entire chamber shouted in unison. Your loss, James said, shrugging. The story about Greek fire is wild. We made water burn. Half the translators glitched at once. Ambassador Harrell stammered, desperate to change the subject. Perhaps we should discuss your modern capabilities? James tilted his head thoughtfully. Modern, huh? Well, just last week, our defense lab accidentally created a new kind of explosive while trying to invent better coffee creamer. Coffee? Creamer? Whispered Counselor Piss weakly. Yep, James said. Turns out chemistry's funny that way. The important part is we're really good at finding military uses for everyday stuff. Give a soldier duct tape and a paper clip, and he'll build a weapon of mass destruction. The room filled with horrified silence. Cree finally spoke, voice trembling. Surely you're exaggerating. Am I? James asked with mock innocence, pulling up a hologram. This little thing is called a potato cannon, just a harmless hobby project, unless you modify it. He pressed play. The demonstration made 3 more assistants faint. And that's just our weekend fun, James said with a grin. Wait till you see our real military toys. Anyone curious about depleted uranium rounds? No more demonstrations, cried Ambassador Sherry, his tentacles now ghost white. All right, James said, raising his hands in surrender. Let's keep it simple. How about orbital kinetic bombardment? We call them rods from God. He tapped his pad. A hologram appeared. Tungsten rods falling from orbit like silent meteors. Basically, he explained, we just drop these from space and let gravity do the work. No explosives needed. The chamber exploded into chaos. Alarms, shouts, and panicked translators struggling to process what they'd just heard. And through it all, James Rodriguez stood calmly in the center of the storm, smiling. The counselor once said humanity built weapons for fun. And honestly, she wasn't wrong. Nothing sparks human creativity more than finding new ways to make things explode. Speaking of which, have you heard about our orbital weapons? Let me tell you about kinetic bombardment. Basically, we drop metal rods from space and let gravity do the rest. No nukes, no chemicals, just pure physics. The alien ambassador's translator wasn't malfunctioning, not this time. It was catching every word of James Rodriguez's enthusiastic explanation about how humanity once turned satellites into orbital cannons. But your species claims to be peaceful, the ambassador protested. James smiled, the kind of smile that makes diplomats nervous. Oh, we are, he said cheerfully. Very peaceful. We just like to make sure we have options, just in case. The chamber erupted into anxious whispers. Alien delegates scrambled to update their threat assessments. In the middle of it all, James stood there, hands in pockets, whistling something suspiciously close to the Marine Corps hymn. Don't worry, he called out to the panicking crowd. I haven't even gotten to the good part yet. When the ambassador regained composure, he asked politely, Perhaps, Human Rodriguez, you could explain those rules of war you mentioned earlier? James's eyes lit up. Oh, the Geneva Conventions? Sure. Simple stuff, really. We just kept inventing such creative ways to kill each other that eventually someone said, hey, maybe we should set some limits. The room fell into horrified silence. You needed written rules not to torture prisoners or shoot medics? One delegate asked, trembling. Oh yeah, James nodded. And the funniest part? We had to keep updating them, because people kept finding loopholes. The aliens stared in disbelief. Loopholes? In not committing atrocities? Exactly, said James, pulling out a data pad. Like flamethrowers, for example. Technically legal weapons. We just had to write very specific rules about not using them on civilians, for obvious reasons. He paused thoughtfully. And expanding bullets, those were a big no-no. Apparently they did too much damage for comfort. One ambassador nearly fainted. Another whispered, your species designed projectiles to cause more pain? Pain? James shrugged. That was just a side effect. We were aiming for maximum tissue damage. By the time James started talking about gas that melts skin, half the chamber looked ready to pass out. But hey, he added with a grin, that's why we made the rules. Gotta keep things civilized, right? He leaned closer. You wouldn't believe how long we debated what kind of knife you're allowed to attach to your rifle. The room erupted again. No, they shouted in unison. Your loss, James said, chuckling. The field manual diagrams are fascinating. Later that day, an assistant ran into the chamber, panicking. Ambassadors! Our analysts have finished studying human weapon development patterns. And they've turned almost every scientific discovery into a weapon, even medical ones. Oh yes, James said proudly. Did you know instant glue was originally developed to seal battlefield wounds? The assistant ran out screaming. But my favorite example, James continued, is how we figured out our weather satellites could be used to guide missiles. Talk about dual-use technology. At that, the aliens triggered the emergency alarm. Humanity's threat level was being rewritten again. Come on, James protested. I haven't even gotten to antimatter yet. Antimatter! Half the room screamed. Relax, James said with a smirk. Only small amounts. Enough to flatten a continent. Kidding. Probably. By now, translators were breaking down from stress. And as the alarms blared, James added cheerfully, "Oh, and once we accidentally turned party foam into a weapon." Long story. Moments later, the Galactic Council had fully evacuated. James stood alone, whistling again. "Was it something I said?" he muttered. "They didn't even see my PowerPoint." 3 days later, the Rodriguez incident became legendary. The Galactic Council gathered again to discuss humanity. Based on new data, one alien said solemnly, "We recommend upgrading the human threat level to yes." The screen displayed the new summary: humanity, classification, oh God, please no. Diplomatic recommendation, approve everything they ask for. Notes, they weaponized coffee creamer. Warning, they treat the laws of physics as polite suggestions. When asked what became of James, another delegate sighed, the humans promoted him. He's now their chief diplomatic liaison. Apparently, they admired his honest communication style. A collective shiver ran through the chamber. Then the doors slid open, and there he was again. "Hi, everyone." James beamed. "I've got a new presentation, how we turned a soda factory into a munitions plant in under 48 hours. The chamber emptied faster than ever before. James smiled, opened his communicator, and called Earth. "Mission accomplished, General. They've upgraded our status from mostly harmless to please don't destroy us. Oh, and they gave us unrestricted trade access." He listened for a moment. "No, sir. I didn't even need to show them the real weapons folder. The coffee story did the trick." He hung up, still whistling, this time when Johnny comes marching home. On the empty screen behind him, a new emergency protocol blinked. In case of human conflict, hide, and pray they don't notice you. P.S. Do not, under any circumstance, ask about the fork incident. If you enjoyed this human madness, subscribe to the channel for more twisted sci-fi tales. Comment below what alien reaction made you laugh the most. And don't forget to like the video. It keeps Earth's diplomats happy.